Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. In this episode, we're going to wrap up our 5-part series on growth strategies, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Jason Bay. He's the Chief Prospecting Officer at Blissful Prospecting. His friends call him J-Bay, so I'm going to call him J-Bay on this podcast. I was introduced to J-Bay by his friend and our mutual friend, Lindsay Pollock at Tax Credit Collective. You might remember that Lindsay was a previous guest on our podcast when we were talking about tax credits. Jason also has his own fun podcast called, interestingly enough, Blissful Prospecting. And after meeting Jason recently, I was immediately impressed with his passion for helping sales teams develop great prospecting strategies, because we all know that prospecting is the lifeblood of any sales effort. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, J-Bay.
I'm excited for that, man. I'm not the most bald guy on this call either, dude. I'm kind of excited for that too.
You're usually the bold guy on the podcast.
I'm usually the baldest person. Yeah.
Oh, the baldest. I thought you said bold. Oh, I thought you said bold. Yeah, I'm definitely the baldest guy on this podcast. If we were typecasting, I would just get bald guys to be on, right? So I make bald look good. So tell us about Blissful Prospecting.
Yeah. So we started. I got my sales career started actually going door to door, selling house painting services. So I've kind of always been the outbound, cold, approach type of person. And I ended up working with that company and really enjoying sales, which I never planned to get into. I was actually going to school to be a forensic scientist. So this is like a complete 180, of that. And I was hooked on it ever since. And the reason why we started Blissful Prospecting is when I was working with that company, CollegeWorks Painting, I was a sales manager for them for 3 years after that. I was their marketing director for a couple years. One of the big initiatives that I worked on with them was starting an outbound call center. So I didn't know anything about what software you use, how to set it up, who to hire, anything. So I figured out all that from scratch. And that was like a $35 million company at the time with no formal marketing department, right? So we ended up hiring 15, 20 reps. I hired a call center manager. And that right there, that was in 2013. I was like, you know what? I would love to do this for other businesses. So when I started my own journey as a consulting, really in 2013, 2014, to find my clients, I had to do a lot of outbound, and this was now B2B outbound versus business to consumer stuff. And that was where like cold email and like LinkedIn and like all this other stuff came in. And I just had people asking me like, hey, Jason, that was a really cool email. It's kind of cool how you personalize it there. Can you just do that for us? And then that's how I kind of went from the consulting stuff I was doing into, it sounds like there's like a really big need, because most businesses I talk to, like everyone knows they need to do more prospecting and everyone hates to do it. Right? So that was where Blissful came, is like, how can we make this something that is more purposeful, that is actually value driven for the prospect and not just a sales pitch? And how can we get people to like pick up the phone and actually like set meetings from it versus, being those like pitchy, sleazy, kind of salespeople that are just cold calling all day. So that's what we do now at Blissful Prospecting, is help, kind of remove the suck, from prospecting and make it more about the prospect as well. Make it less about you and like what you want as the salesperson or the business owner, and more about like how you can help the other person.
We take the suck out of prospecting.
Yeah. I just came up with that, actually. I've never said that before.
Yeah, you're going to work that into your conversations over the next few days. So you told us a little bit about your background. Now I have to ask, a $35 million house painting business, is that what I heard you say?
Yeah. So CollegeWorks Painting, what they do is they hire college students, and essentially it's an internship, but I learned how to essentially, like, it was like, hey, run a house painting business was kind of the pitch, right? Make $10,000 over the course of a summer. And I was like, sign me up. That sounds awesome. I didn't know that I'd be going door to door. And I also didn't know what sales was. I didn't really have anyone in my family that did sales. So I didn't realize that there was like a process to it, just like anything else, right? It's not just show up to someone's house and quote them the price and just give it to them and then take off like every other contractor does. They actually taught us how to, let's spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with a homeowner. Let's talk about what is building rapport. How do you find a need? Like, how do you point out peeling paint and then talk about what happens if you don't take care of it? How do you talk about and like really build trust with them, and talk about the process and how you stack up compared to other people? And then how do you go in and like close and like objection handle and all that other stuff? Because to paint your house, I don't know if you've ever paid anyone to do that or how that's worked. It's not cheap. It could be $3,000 to $10,000 depending on the size of your home. So I'm like a 19-year-old kid with braces, selling to people that are like literally over twice as my age. And what I loved about it was the reason I would always ask people why they hired me, which I think is a really good thing to do as a company and as a sales team, is like always make sure you know why your customers hire you. What they always said was it was never you were the cheapest price or I thought you would have the best quality or anything like that. We're just like, hey, you seem knowledgeable, but I just like you. Like I trust that you're gonna like do whatever it takes to like do a good job for me. So I'm like winning business over people that are like, the contractors. I mean, there's no shortage of contractors that have been doing stuff for 20, 30 years. And I'm like winning business over these people. And that psychology part of it was really interesting to me. That's really what I love about selling.
That's awesome. Like and trust, right? And so
Yep.
I had a sales guy that worked for me one time that it was all about getting the customer to like you, right? And I said, it's important to like, but you have to transfer that like into trust, right?
Yeah.
It's because people will only buy from people they trust. And so, boy, that's no wonder it's a $35 million house painting business that hires college kids, because apparently they took the time to teach you guys how to do it right. That is amazing. Now, I put myself through college painting houses, but mostly
cool.
friends and stuff like that. And so, it's really interesting. Back in the day, of course, I was out there selling it. Mostly it was friends and family and stuff like that. But I was out there selling it. But then, of course, my best friend and I did all the work. And back in the day, I'm 19 years old and I'm up on, the second story of a house and it's just another couple inches. And if I think about the way I was, I'm leaning off the ladder and reaching as far as I can to paint something. And today, how we changed, right? Today, if I get on the third rung of a ladder, suddenly I'm going, oh my God, I'm getting too high off the ground.
Yeah. I don't like heights either, man. I don't want to be up. Like after all that house painting I did, because I did a lot of it myself, just training people and stuff. I'm like, I'm not gonna ever paint our house.
Yeah. I
want to pick up another paintbrush.
This house painting service to come paint your house. You'll see if their techniques still work. So, all right. So we're talking about prospecting and cold calling, but Jason, isn't cold calling dead? I hear that all the time. Isn't it dead?
Yeah. So I think we have to talk about like how do you define a cold call? Because people have kind of different definitions of it. A cold call to me is like anytime you call someone and they're not expecting your call, that is a cold call, right? So the part of that process that is dying is really the smile and dial. Let's get a random list of 1,000 VPs of HR or whatever it is your target, and then you just pick up the phone. Hey, this is Jason with ABC HR Solutions. Did I catch you at a good time? Hey, I'd love to set up a time to meet with you and talk about our solutions and all the companies we work with and all that. Like that style is like, that's dying a very, very quick death. So the approach is really not how can I cold call people? It's how can I be really intentional and move from this mass blast, either that through email or phone, into more of a quality first approach and think about who are my best customers? Like over the last 6 or 12 months, who's been the easiest to close with the shortest sales cycles? Who best represents our ideal client? Who were we able to get case studies and referrals from? Like, what are those companies that best represent what our next best customer will look like? And then you're going to create an ideal client profile, and you're going to start looking at like commonality in industry, maturity of business, employee size, size of a department, technology they use. There's all kinds of stuff you can look at. And then reverse engineer the sale. In sales, they call it a deal review. You want to do the same kind of thing there. When I closed this sale, who was the very first person that I interacted with? What was their job title? And then who had to, interact with me throughout the sales process? What were their job titles? And then now you start to like basically retrace your footsteps and look at what does that look like now? And you're going to reach out to people. We use HR solutions as an example. Let's say you sell HR solutions, because you brought up an example of this. You sell HR solutions to, Fortune 500 companies in manufacturing, let's say, right? So now you'd be like, when I do this cold calling, which is really, we'll talk about, all the pieces involved with that. I'm only going to look for companies that are manufacturers, that are a certain stage in business or a certain revenue, that I can reach out to this person and say, hey, Tom, I don't know if you're like these other manufacturers that we've worked with, but sometimes what we hear them say is that they have a really tough time getting their employees engaged in their employee benefits program or whatever HR people help with. I'd love to share with you what we're doing with some of those other companies that might be helpful for you. That is not a cold call. That's not some random thing that you're doing. You're being incredibly intentional about the companies and the people you're engaging with to make sure they best represent the companies that you're already successfully working with. One last thing on that is that prospects, like people want to know what other people like them are doing. So what are other businesses like them doing? What are other job roles like them? What are they focused on? What are they worried about right now? What are the trends? Like that's what you can share when you're prospecting.
That's awesome. Honestly, that's all about kind of defining your niche market, your focus. I coach a lot of our clients on your market's just too broad, right? You're
Yeah.
not only does it help you narrow in your prospecting like you're talking about, but it also helps you really narrow your focus on your marketing efforts, right?
Yep.
I've had clients. I've spent a lot of time in restaurant suppliers and whatnot, and I always tell them, look, what type of restaurants are, I ask them, what type of restaurants are you focused on? Where do you have your best success? Who are you dealing with? Because if we're trying to be all things to all restaurants, there's 400,000 restaurants, plus or minus during COVID, I
Yep.
guess. But there's 400,000 restaurants in America, and you got pizza restaurants, coffee shops, sandwiches, breakfast places. Where is it that you live? Because that's where you want to focus all of your efforts. And it's not just the marketing effort, but what I'm hearing from you is that that's your sales effort too. Too many companies don't go through the process of identifying their ideal client profile. And I just feel like that is one of the most important things you can do in sales and marketing. How do you go about defining that?
Yeah. Like an analogy I would use is like, dating. I don't think that very many people, if you're looking for an actual partner, someone to get married to, you just don't just wing it. Don't most people have a pretty good idea of like what they're looking for? Do you want kids? Do you not want kids? Are you into the outdoor stuff? Are you not? Where do you want to live? What kind of family do you want? I mean, it's the same thing right here. So if you don't like have some intentionality behind what you're looking for, you're like, people are going to look at your thing, your product or your service, they're going to be like, that doesn't really relate with me. So it's not about saying no to things as much as when I do outbound and I'm reaching out to people proactively, they need to look at me and be like, oh, Jason, like he looks like he knows about our industry because they have all these cool case studies with all these companies that like are exactly like mine. So the framework to answer your question, that I call it the perfect fit identifier, and it's 3 parts. We've talked about 2 of them. One is the company level. So I'm going to look for companies that best represent the companies in our current client portfolio. So again, I'm looking who's the easiest to close, shortest sales cycles, maybe largest average deal size, most referrals, best results, etc. The next layer of that is the persona. So the persona, those job titles I was talking about, there's a couple things that people tend to overlook. Everyone wants to go after the decision maker, right? They want to go after that VP or C-level person that's going to sign the check. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, But just know that every single other person is reaching out to them too, and there's other ways to get your foot in the door. There's two really underrated, sort of positions you can go after. One is a champion. So I'll give you an example. Like I'm typically working with the sales departments at companies. And at large companies, my champion is typically a sales manager. It's the person that stands a lot to gain if I come in and like can help their reps, and it's going to make them look really good, but they don't sign the check. They don't even control any of the budget. But in one of my recent like really big deals with a pretty decent sized company, biggest deal that we've landed so far, this sales manager, like he was able to set up all the meetings for us with his VP. He was able to loop in the other people. Like he was advocating on my behalf because he cared a lot about it. So think about who your champions are. So it doesn't always have to be top-down approach. You can go bottoms up too. You can start at a manager level and gather some intel and get some introductions up. And the third one that gets overlooked too is the influencers. So an influencer, and I'll use my self as an example again, people in marketing are in charge of lead generation, but they might not be the people I interact with during the sales process. They might have a lot to say though around the prospecting and how that gets done and how their messaging gets portrayed in a cold email. So I need to be aware of other people that might have their hand in the pot that might be influencing the decision that I might not interact with. So those are the two parts. The third part that's most commonly overlooked is values. So I'll give you an example here. I work with a company. They don't like being branded like this, but I won't share their name. They essentially help companies outsource their customer support. So Yeti is a company here in Austin, right? Here in Austin, Texas.
I know.
So when Yeti, yeah, really great company. So when Yeti runs, right yeah, you got the cup too. So when Yeti runs a special or Cyber Monday or Black Friday or whatever, or Christmas, they get bombarded with customer support requests, right? People chatting, emailing, and all that other stuff. What they cannot afford is slow response time because that makes the brand look bad and they lose sales. So this company comes in and says, hey, instead of hiring people during the seasonality type of stuff, we'll come in and just like take over for you when you need it. And you could turn us on and off. Really cool value prop. But you know what? If the business doesn't value great customer service in delivering a VIP experience to people, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of companies out there that don't really care about like quick response time. They're like, you know what, we sell our stuff and people are just going to have to wait for this. So what you're looking for, like when they're prospecting, is I'm looking for three things. I'm looking for what does the company brag about? So what do I see this company I'm reaching out to that aligns, like what do they brag about that's related to us? So are they bragging about how good their customer service is, how great their products are, funding that they recently got? The next layer that I'm looking at is where do they spend money? So that's like, are they hiring right now? Are they acquiring companies, right? All that kind of stuff. And the last one is content. So the content is what are they educating their customers about? So I think what you need to think about when you're selling and prospecting is think about how your product or service helps the people that you serve help serve their customers better. Like think like a layer deeper there. So that values piece, like look for alignment in what do they brag about? What do they educate their customers about? And what do they spend money on? That are like these kind of indicators that like, oh, they might value what we value. In this example, great customer support. They might value that because I can find indicators of, hey, they brag about how good their customer support is. They get tons of great online reviews. They're hiring in their customer support department right now. And those are things that when I call someone, I be like, hey, Tom, Jason with Blissful Prospecting. I know I'm kind of reaching out, out of the blue here, but you got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling and you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. Tom says, yes. Well, hey, I was actually doing some research on you guys. I noticed that you really value customer support, and particularly, I really love that article that came out around how you guys highlighted a lot of your best customers. Thought it was really cool. And that was actually the reason I was reaching out, is since you really value customer support, that's something we really value as well. And a problem that we oftentimes hear is there's a cost of delivering great customer support. It takes a lot of time, can cost a lot of money, and we're helping companies offset some of those costs and making it less stressful to deliver great customer support. Do you have a minute? I could ask you a couple of questions, see if you might be, this might be relevant for you. So like that pitch is like, I didn't say we are so-and-so company. We do this. We're so awesome because we worked with all these companies, right? It's like, hey, I see that you value this thing. We value that a lot too. And here's a problem that we sometimes hear from people when they're trying to accomplish this. It's all about them. So that's the approach that I'm talking about. You got me on a roll right here, Tom.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. To when you center your attention on what I call the hero of the story, right? I'm a big
Yeah.
fan of story branding, and
Yep.
too many companies think that they're the hero, right? But they're not. It's their customer that is the hero of the story. I want to be their guide that makes
Yep.
them a great superhero, right? I want to be Alfred behind Batman, right? Uh,
Yep.
so that's awesome. So let's pull back in and talk a little bit about reaching prospects. There's a million ways to reach prospects today. You can do email, phone, LinkedIn, snail mail, smoke signals, whatever it is. What channel do you find is the best way to reach customers or prospective?
Uh, yeah. So I don't think there is a best channel. The approach here is really like multi-channel is what you want to do. Now, if you think about this, the reason for that is if I'm reaching out to you, Tom, I don't really know what your preferred method of communication is. I don't know if you're more of a phone guy. I don't know if you're more of an email guy. I got some prospects that don't answer any of my emails or calls, but they'll chat with me on LinkedIn. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't really know. And what you can do is like kind of create this like multi-channel experience. So like the prospect, everyone's got a smartphone these days. So normally everything is getting like thrown into that smartphone. So when you can combine those touches together, LinkedIn, that pops up a notification on their phone, an email, that's a notification, a voicemail, that's a notification. So the framework that I have around this, I call it KISS. It's keep it simple sequencing. People like really overthink this. So the keep it simple sequencing looks like this. You're going to follow this same pattern for 3 weeks in a row. And so day one of the sequence, let's say it's Wednesday right now. So on a Wednesday, I'm going to call you, Tom. And if you don't pick up, I'm going to leave a voicemail. And that voicemail is going to sound a lot like that cold call pitch I did. Except for at the end of the voicemail, I'm going to say, hey, Tom, if you want to call me back, my number is 503-310-9318. But I'm about to send you an email right now. And the subject line is, hi, Tom, just left a voicemail. Or whatever the subject line is. So I'm going to use the voicemail to point them to the email. So the goal is not necessarily to get a call back because most people won't call you back. But most people listen to voicemail or they get it transcribed and it like gets emailed to them, right? So they're going to see it in one form or the other. And then your email follows a very similar language to what I said in that cold email. So this whole week's one worth of touches is focused on that one problem, like the cost of delivering great customer support is the example I used. And then I'm going to send a LinkedIn connection request. So I'm going to do all three of those at the same time on day one. Call you, leave a voicemail, and then I'm going to send you an email right after that. Then I'm going to send you a LinkedIn connection request. I'm going to create a little bit of noise. And then 2 days later, so this would be Friday, because today we're talking on a Wednesday, I'm going to call, voicemail is optional, and then I'm going to send a short email on the same email chain. I'm going to reply all to that first email and say, hey, Tom, any thoughts? ? Jason, that's it. And you just follow that same pattern 3 weeks in a row. So week 2, you're going to pick a different angle. So maybe it's not the customer support angle. In this case, maybe it's the revenue angle. What are you missing out on by not responding quick enough? Like what's the cost of that from a revenue standpoint? So your product or solution probably fixes 2 or 3 really big problems for your clients. So each week is going to focus on a different problem. Run that 3 weeks in a row. You got 15 touches, which is kind of the magic number with outreach. You're doing it in a way that's fairly spread out. You don't have to come up with like an insane amount of content because each week it's like you're basically repurposing the phone message into the voicemail, which gets repurposed into your cold email. So kind of think about like this podcast is being repurposed between video and audio. And if you wanted to, you could even repurpose parts of it for a blog post, right? So like kind of think of it out loud like that. I'm like catering to the different mediums.
Yeah, that's I love that approach. Wow, because they say that you have to hear the message at least 7 times, but
Rule
50
of 7.
times
Yep.
even better, right? I mean, the minimum of 7. Of course, that's probably old. We are so inundated with information today that perhaps it needs to be 16 or 18 times until you can actually break through. I used to call the KISS method something else, but I'll substitute sequencing in the future. When I use that, I like the multi-channel approach. So many businesses use what's called inbound to drive traffic and leads and that kind of thing. Of course, prospecting is really outbound, right? So First, why should we do outbound if we've got an effective inbound? And second, does outbound complement inbound efforts?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question in that way because that's kind of the big question I get. Like, why even do outbound? And I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I mean, in inbound, I'd rather do a call for an inbound lead than an outbound lead because they're coming to you. They're a little further along in the buyer's journey, right? They're kind of in this phase where they're considering solutions or looking for ways to fix their problem. Versus outbound, I could catch you at a time where you already purchased something recently, right? Or you're not even thinking about it. So there's pros and cons to both. To me, it's not about doing one or the other. It's about doing both of them. So what you're going to get with outbound that you're not going to get with inbound is, I don't know if anyone's ever seen a company where you're like, oh, that company, like that would be such a like game changer for our business if we landed this logo. And that company may not know about your company. And the likelihood of you being able to just sit there and have them reach out to you or for you to get a warm introduction because you don't know anyone is very low. That's where outbound comes in. Is like, how can you start to like look and hunt for companies that might not that you might not normally be on their radar, and like how can you get on their radar and educate them? The other thing too is most high growth companies have outbound sales teams. It's just quicker. The growth is much quicker than inbound. Like it takes a long time to create an inbound engine and nurture those folks and do all that other stuff. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But on the other end of it too, if you got salespeople out there just, leading with value-based messaging like we're talking about and really being proactive about those companies that you really want to work with, you could do both at the same time. So the way that they complement each other is, and I'll give you some examples. So like I post content on LinkedIn. So when I post about cold calling on LinkedIn, there might be 100 people like it, maybe a couple dozen comments. Guess what? One or two of those people fit my ideal client profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to then reach out to Tom, who commented on my cold calling post. And Tom, let's say, runs a company or is a sales leader. I'm like, hey, Tom, thanks for commenting on my post. How are things going for your reps right now? What are you guys hearing? And now I'm in a conversation that I started with Tom where I'm doing some outbound there. I could reach out to you on LinkedIn. I could give you a call. I do this a lot too. And those are the warmest cold calls ever. I'll be like, hey, Tom, Jason with Blissful Prospecting, you commented on my LinkedIn post earlier. Oh, yeah, Jason, what's up? And then, it's like, that's how you can get those two to work together. So if you're creating content or people, what might be more applicable to your audience is people go on the website and download a white paper, sign up for a webinar, whatever it might be. Don't just let those people sit in an email list. Start conversations with them. And they may not be ready to buy stuff, but like introduce yourself and educate them. Hey, Tom, saw you signed up for the webinar. I'm really curious, what were you hoping to get from it? Or what did you get from the webinar? What kind of stuff are you running across right now? Hey, well, we're working with some other clients like that are dealing with some similar situations. Do you want to hop on a call when I'm not, calling you in the middle of the day here, and we can, talk about what some of those companies are doing and can share some insights with you. So I can like be a little bit more proactive about getting those conversations started prior to the point of the person raising their hand and saying, Tom, I want a demo call, or Tom, I want to do a sales call with you and talk to you. You can hit people that are a little earlier in that funnel, but that aren't completely cold because they've been consuming your content.
And content, and of course having a content strategy and calendar and all of those things are so very important because you got to be consistent with your content, right? I mean, it's you can't go post one time on LinkedIn and think that okay, that's gonna bring me leads. It's people start looking for and thinking about. And you mentioned repurposing stuff. We actually do that with a podcast just starting, I think, a week or two ago. This is an idea that came out of our marketing team. They said, hey, your podcasts are fairly lengthy, right? I mean, it's a commitment to listen to your podcast. And of course, many of our consumers of the podcast will listen to it, to and from work or driving around or whatever, running, whatever they're doing. And I've always said, I don't care the length of it. There's a lot of comments about, they should be short or they should be long. There's many ways to go. But what our marketing team just came up with is a new concept that we started last week. And I can't believe how it's caught on fire for us. We're calling it pod snacks. When you don't have time to digest a full podcast meal, have a little pod snack. And
I love it.
and we're taking like anywhere from 2 to 5 minute clips out of our podcast, wrapping them in a new little wrapper, and then we, at the end we say, hey, if you're hungry for more, then go listen to the whole thing, and we give a link to it, right? And
I
so
love that.
so yeah, it's a lot of fun to do that. But I can take the same content that we already have. We can repurpose it in several different ways, post it on every different type of social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, and we highlight it on Instagram, all these different places. But it's the same content that we're using, and people will start hearing that message, right? And it drives folks back to us. These are some great nuggets. We're talking with Jay Bay. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Like it or not, eventually you'll have to come to a point when it's time for your business to transition. Will you be ready? Will you be able to get the maximum value for your business? Brought to you by Mastery Partners, Mastery Class is a 12-month program designed specifically for business owners. We meet once a month as a group to work through our Transition Readiness Assessment. Expand your business toolbox through leadership presentations, have live interaction with other business owners. This program determines vulnerabilities in your business that will affect business value and your ability to transition in the future. Whether that transition is in 2 or 15 years, what you do now has long-term effects on the future value of your business. We have the know-how you need to get the results you want in your business to maximize business value. To learn more and secure your spot in the program, visit mbvmasteryclass.com. That's mbvmasteryclass, mastery with a Y, mbvmasteryclass.com.
We're back with Jason Bay, Chief Prospecting Officer of Blissful Prospecting, and we're talking about prospecting strategies to fuel growth. So before the break, we talked about inbound versus outbound effort. What is working right now with outbound prospecting?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, and we've talked about some of these sort of things. Multi-channel, multi-touch is really important, right? You need to at least combine phone and email together. The social part's kind of optional. It needs to be multi-touch, right? I need to reach out to a person more than a couple times. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing a trend with that's pretty cool is if you can provide more visual elements into your prospecting. So I'll give you an example. You could use a tool called Vidyard, and it allows you to embed a video into your email. So instead of you writing the email, you could have a video of you waving, saying, "Hey, Tom, Jason with Blissful Prospecting here. Thought I'd put a face to the name." Same pitch, right? Here's the reason why I'm reaching out. You could also, in that video, so let's say you have a really good insight to share. So you got some really good studies or a white paper or something like that that would be really educational for the prospect. Well, you know what I hate, Tom? I hate getting an email with a 30-page PDF in it. I'm not going to read that, right? So with that video, what you could do is you could share your screen, hit record on the video, and you could say, "Hey, Tom, you probably don't want to read this whole 30-page document, so I wanted to clip out this little piece for you and explain it. Looks like you're a blank position, and a lot of times what I hear is people like you care a lot about this. Here's an insight I thought was really interesting. Here it is. I'd love to unpack this with you a little bit more in a quick discussion if you think it's relevant. Let me know if you want to chat." Right? So I can visually show you something. The other thing too is think about how you could visualize data versus just putting numbers. So for example, with Lindsay, we were working on this because she helps with tax credits, right? So one of the things that we were talking about was the opportunity that is missed by most small business owners. She talked about this on your podcast, right? 83% of business owners under $50 million that qualify for tax credits don't even take advantage of them. Well, you could say it like that, or you could show the person a pie chart and say, "Hey, here's the 83%. That's the opportunity." Right? So there's some things that you could do with a thumbnail or a video and that sort of stuff. Think about how you can make your stuff more visual. So get outside of the text-based stuff and the word-based stuff and try to incorporate more visual elements, because attention spans are just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So just having something that can kind of catch the person's attention and keep them engaged for a few seconds.
That's really cool. Does the video, like using Vidyard? I've heard of that. Of course, I get emails occasionally. I like that. Does that tend to get people's attention, or is it only a percentage of people that will look at something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like anything else. It's not going to work with everyone, but Tom, for those of you listening, if I held a piece of paper like this in the thumbnail and it said, "Hey Tom," and I was waving like this in the thumbnail, I think you might click on it. Or if the background was your LinkedIn profile, and I was like, "Hey Tom, check out this video. I recorded it for you." A lot of people are going to click on that. And it depends on your industry, right, and how uh, tech forward your industry is, right? But you could still embed an image into an email as well. Hey,
Okay.
saw this stat. Were you aware of this? Or hey, here's a screenshot of something that one of their competitors. Hey, did you know that they were doing this? Love to share with you some more stuff about how you can prevent this or whatever the call to action is. So yeah, I would definitely test these visual mediums and no different than if you were whiteboarding, with a client in person that you were selling to, and I have a whiteboard here, and I was like drawing stuff on the whiteboard. You could do that too. There's all kinds of fun stuff that you could do.
That's really cool. I used to, gosh, years ago, before we were using a lot of the electronic ways to connect with people, because I've been around for a few years. We used to invest in these massive, booklets that were about our software and stuff like that. And they were beautifully done, but they were like 16 pages, right? And the sales reps, when we introduced this, I gave them a stack of them, and I gave them a bunch of Sharpies. And I said, you don't send this out to somebody with a letter attached to it. What I want you to do, because we gave you lots of blank space on the front, I want you to write with the Sharpie on the piece, hey, Tom, I was thinking of you, flip to page 12, and I highlighted something that would be of interest, right? Because then that'll
Yep.
get their attention. Now you thought about them, you were intentional, you're not just giving them something. I've actually had people do that with me by seeing an article somewhere, actually printing out the article and mailing it to me, right? Because now I'm going to
Oh,
open it
that's
up.
cool.
And I've got a great friend who actually does a lot of sales training with the Sandler program. He's been on our podcast before, Tom Neeson. He sent me an article one time. It was like an article that he clipped out or photocopied out of Inc. magazine or something like that. But he wrote a note, a sticky note, and put it on there and said, "Hey, when I thought of you when I read the highlighted part, and I flip in and I see the highlighted part, well, then these got my attention. Now I'm going to read the whole article, right? Because he actually related it to me." And you're talking about the electronic ways to do the same kinds of things. And I think that is
Yep.
really important to make that connection. So you work with a lot of clients and you're considered kind of their coach. So how would you coach somebody to approach objection handling?
Yeah, so I have a framework for that too. It's called EVO.
Why am I not
Um,
surprised, right?
yeah, so the EVO objection handling framework, and EVO is an acronym. It's empathize, validate, offer. So I think the mistake that most people make when they objection handle is they do it in a way that like really like almost like offends the prospect. So like Tom, if you gave me an objection like, "Oh, I don't need sales training. I'm already working with Sandler." And I'm thinking to myself, well, hey, I could do a better job than these guys with prospecting. And I'm just using this as an example. I really like Sandler stuff. But if I made you feel like an idiot for using my competitor, you'd be like, dude, what's your problem, man? And that's how most people objection handle. It's like, so and so is like, oh, I'm using ABC competitor. Oh, interesting. I haven't really heard good things about them. Like, if you had to improve one thing about them, what would you improve? And it's like, it's really personal and it's really invasive. And what it makes the prospect feel like is like really misunderstood and just like kind of disrespected. So there's like this loop that we get into where prospect gives us an objection. We feel kind of bad and misunderstood about it. And they're like, why don't they see the value in us? Or someone says not interested. And you're like, how could you not be interested when I haven't even told you about my company yet? And it goes in this loop the other way too, where the prospects, you respond with this weird rebuttal and the prospect's thinking, is Jason even listening to me right now? Like I already have a solution. So the way we can break that loop is with empathy. So what I need to do is instead of trying to like talk to you in logic, why it logically makes sense to do something else or do something differently, I need to actually engage you on an emotional level to disarm you and get you actually open. I can have all the best advice in the world, Tom, but if you're not in a mode where you want to actually take that advice, it doesn't matter. So we can use not interested as an example. So that's like more of like a shallow objection. So if someone says, you call them in a cold call and they're like, hey, not interested, not right now, I'm busy, whatever it might be. What I'm going to talk to is what I think that they're feeling. So when someone says not interested, what they're probably thinking is, who is this person? Oh God, another salesperson. Oh God, I'm in the middle of something. I thought you were someone else. All of those things, right? So I'm going to empathize with you, and then I'm going to validate that. So that's what this might sound something like this. Tom says not interested. Oh, hey, Tom, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something. And if that's the case, I could totally understand why now might not be the best time to take a call. And immediately you're like, oh, okay. So he's actually acknowledging what I said. He's not trying to like rebuttal me or anything like that. And then the offer piece, so the O, and this is where you mentioned Sandler. They call it upfront contracts. I call it permission-based, questions or permission-based openers. Same kind of concept. So I could say, hey, sounds like I might have caught you in the middle of something, Tom. If that's the case, I could totally understand why now might not be the best time to take a call, but this might be a long shot. Like, would it hurt if I took like 30 seconds to tell you why I'm calling, and then you could let me know if you want to keep chatting or if this is even relevant for you? 8 or 9 times out of 10, and all the thousands of call recordings I've listened to, people do this like that. That typically works. The person's typically open to hearing. That's kind of the beauty behind it. So that's one way of doing it. If someone says we already have a vendor, that's probably a more common objection. We need to again think about the fact, like, why would this person be saying that, and what are they thinking? Well, they're probably thinking I really like the person that I'm working with, and I don't want to betray them, and I don't like even want to entertain another possibility. Or 2, it was a lot of work to like get this vendor involved, and like last thing I want to do is disrupt that process. So let's just talk to that, empathize and validate. Hey Tom, sounds like you're already taken care of, and it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into like the system that you're using to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And the last thing I'm sure you want to do is like completely disrupt that. So I could totally understand if you're not looking into like new vendors right now. But hey, this might be a long shot. I'm actually working with a couple of your competitors, and what we're figuring out is how they're doing X, Y, and Z. Would it hurt if I shared some of those things with you, and then you could, maybe take that back to your team? And in worst case scenario, if you hear it and you're not interested, and you tell me to go bug off, and which I'm happy to do as well.
I love that. You give multiple times. I'm hearing several points of when you're describing what you're doing, giving them permission to say, hey, I don't have time for you right now. And
Mhm.
in too many sales calls, they're pushing and they're trying to argue. But if I can tell you in my own experience, when people actually get me on the phone in that very same scenario, if they give me a chance, put me back in control of the conversation, I'm still going to give them an opportunity to sell me something, right?
Yeah. Well, you
So
bring up something so important, and this mental block that we have in sales is that we feel like we need to control the conversation. And we feel like if we give the prospect a choice to say yes or no, well, then they could say no, and that's bad. When the opposite is actually true, and this is another framework I call the 5 desires, but I'll just share that one, is like a desire that everyone has is a desire for autonomy. So like when people feel like they have a choice, they're so much more likely to comply when they feel they're doing that out of their own will versus being forced to do it. So you actually want to give prospects choices. That doesn't mean that you sound like unconfident or inconfident, whatever the word is, like lack of confidence. I'm not saying, well, and then Tom, like maybe you could decide, because you probably don't want to talk to me, but maybe then you could decide if you want. You're not doing that. You're just giving them a choice.
that's a perfect opportunity, right? And um, as I used to, one of my mantras that I tell salespeople all the time is that people love to buy. People love to buy. They just hate to be sold.
Yep.
And if you let them control it, then by asking them good questions and allowing them to control the conversation, I think you've got a much better opportunity. I love your approach. I'm sitting here thinking, I want to hire you to prospect for my clients, but you don't do that, do you?
No.
You just teach people how to do it. So there are lots of businesses out there that teach sales techniques, and some of them might offer, prospecting services, things like that. What differentiates your business, Blissful Prospecting, from other sales consulting companies?
I think it depends on like what you're looking for, So if you're looking for like the type of feedback that I get, like the way that I train is very fun. So I try not to be super serious about stuff. Um, to me, people take sales too serious. I think it should be more fun, especially prospecting. So I'm definitely in tune with that. The other thing too is like, as you could tell, I'm very framework focused. So it's not just scripts and templates. It's like, why does this work? What should I do? AKA, those are the framework pieces. And then let's get into the how of like what that script says or what your email says. But you need to understand the psychology behind it. So really, like that's a really big thing that I focus on is that framework type of approach. And then the other thing too is like reinforcement. So I'm not going to come in and meet with your company for 4 hours and upload all this information to you and then take off. We work with our clients on a longer case basis, 6 8 weeks, 3 months. Like, let's actually make these a habit versus me just saying all this stuff that sounds really good and your whole sales team forgets about it in 2 weeks.
Like that. So, even the name of your company, Blissful Prospecting, it sort of puts me at ease, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that was intentional, right? Oh, it's
Yeah.
blissful prospecting, right? It kind of it reduces your anxiety a little bit when you think of it that way. I love your approach. Let me ask you one last business question before we wrap this up, and that is, this podcast is all about maximizing business value. What's the one most important thing that you would recommend to any business owner to build value in their business?
This isn't sexy, but this really fits into the theme of what you do, right? The business, like the resale value, like how sellable is your business? It's systems, man. It's the unsexy part of the business that like every single job you have in your company should have like a wiki. You should be using some sort of thing with like, here's this person's job description. Here are step-by-step directions for all the tasks that this person performs on a weekly basis. With your sales team, it's the same thing. I see this like complete just winging it with the salespeople. They come in and like they wing, they don't have like talk tracks and like email templates. It's like really systemizing everything, making sure everything's got a framework, that it's got an approach to it, that it's documented. All of that stuff is extremely important. You should be able to lose a leader in one department and someone else should be able to come in and pick up right where they left off.
Documenting processes is perhaps one of the most important things a business owner can do. I am so glad that you said that. It's not only sales processes, it's processes throughout
Yep.
the organization. In fact, I would argue, I hear this a lot. I hear this frequently from business owners. Oh man, it's hard to find salespeople, and then it takes us, 6 months or a year to get them up to speed. And I always retort with, so do you have documented processes? And if the answer is no, and by the way, the answer is almost always no, right? If the answer is no, I say, well, that's why it takes you so long to get somebody up to speed, because you're teaching them on the job and you don't have any processes documented. If you take the time and really document bulletproof processes that people can follow step by step, you will cut the time to get somebody up to speed and firing on all cylinders in half, maybe more. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. That's where a playbook, comes in. So
That's it.
Cameron Harold used to be the chief operating officer at 1-800 Got Junk and also College Pro Painters. One thing that he always says is like, anytime someone on your team does a task, it shouldn't feel like the next time they do that task, like the first time they're doing that task again. Like there should be an outline of like the step-by-step directions for everything in your business.
Absolutely. And it's so hard to think about because, if you think about processes in a business, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of processes, and it gets overwhelming by thinking about documenting all of those things. But it just starts with documenting one, right? I mean, have
Yep.
the person who is the best at doing this have a trainee sit beside them and just document what they're doing, and you can clean it up. And next thing you know, you've got a good, clean, documented process. It doesn't have to be that hard. So you have been a great guest, but of course, I can't let you off the hook. People who listen to our podcast are always waiting until my bonus question, and I always ask the bonus question. And now I'm fascinated to hear what your answer is going to be. J-Bay, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
Well, I think I just think trouble with my wife. Just honestly, it's like lack of open-mindedness around certain things. Whether that was a big sticking point in a relationship for a long time was I just had this need to everything I ate had to be organic, kind of thing, and it's just really unnecessary. So stuff like that is just being stubborn and not open-minded about certain stuff. It's I might sound like I'm super open-minded on this interview, but dude, I'm just like anyone else, so that's what's got me in the most trouble.
I love that. And just like usual, guilty. That's definitely one of the things that's gotten me into trouble through the years. People call, you say stubborn, you say strong-willed. Pig-headed is a good description sometimes of the way that I can be. I understand it's gotten me into plenty of trouble. How can our listeners and viewers get in touch with you?
So I actually put something together for you guys that you could check out. It's at blissfulprospecting.com/Tom. So we kind of talked about emails and cold calls and the messaging. We have a framework called the reply method. So it's a framework for writing those cold emails and the messaging. And I broke it down into a one-page guide. So it's got a lot of good stuff in there that kind of summarize what we talked about today. And it's free. You can just download it. It's a one-pager at blissfulprospecting.com/Tom. And then you just go to our website, blissfulprospecting.com. So there's tons of free content on there for you or your sales team. If you have one. And then we also do boot camps and stuff like that where we help people. So if you're looking for a little bit of support too, check out the website.
I love that. That's where do you think I'm going next? I want to see the free stuff. And by the way, that is really important. You mentioned, lots of free stuff on your website. We do the same thing. As I tell people, business owners who want to use our services or who want to think about preparing their business for transition, if they just go to the website, I give away so much free information there. You could almost do it on your own, or you really could do it on your own with all the free information. And people ask me all the time, why do you give all this stuff away for free? I said, well, first of all, everybody could go and do it on their own, but they won't. Right? They're not going to probably, but I keep giving them value. I keep giving them value here, there. This podcast is a great value. People who listen to it are going to have a great value in improving their prospecting process. And when people want my service or need my service, who do you think they're going to call? They're going to call the guy who's been giving them value over and over and over again without any expectation in return. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. You have been a great guest, J-Bay. Thank you for being on our podcast.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
You can find Jason Bay at blissfulprospecting.com, but I would encourage you to do the blissfulprospecting.com/Tom to get some free stuff. You can also find him on LinkedIn. And of course, as always, you can always reach out to me and I will be more than happy to offer a warm introduction. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this. Subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you found this podcast. And if you want to comment, then we love that. We love comments and we respond to all of them. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to develop great prospecting habits and a great prospecting strategy while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.